And we're live.
Coaches. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, they can't hold a flame against you, ay. Blow the whistle, blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, got the game, it ain't no issue, yeah. Blowing the whistle, I had enough with you, the championship, it is gone. Ain't listen to you, I can't give it to you, cause you don't know what I've been on. This is the Coaches Podcast.
Welcome to the Fantasy Coaches Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Jibbs, and today I have Coach Steve with me. We don't have Coach John, but as you can see below, we have our new family member, Dan, and then we also have Brian on the podcast. But Coach Steve, how are we feeling today?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. I do miss my hosting duties sometimes, but I'm glad I get to talk about tight ends today. It's going to be a fun show. Obviously, the tight end class is going to be really deep to talk about, so very excited for that.
Dan, how are we feeling today?
I'm doing great. We're so close to the NFL draft. We were talking pre-show about all the news and moves today, and just it's a great time to work in this industry and be talking about football.
And Brian, tell the listeners where they can find you and how you doing today, brother.
I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me on, folks. Really appreciate it. Although I'm not so sure how good a time it is with all the bickering and hot takes and film versus analytics. Like I'm tired of it. Let's get this draft going. But at the same time, you can find me at ffjunkie_ on Twitter. Rankings and articles at goingfor2.com. I do Dynasty Fever podcast, audio only on Thursdays, and I do Dynasty Saturday Night 5, Saturday nights at 7:30 Eastern on the Going for Two YouTube channel.
All right, that's a lot, but guys, definitely go see his content. I see him all over Twitter. He's definitely worth a great follow, guys. But like Coach Steve said before, or I guess what I said before, we're talking tight ends today. Continuing our rookie draft rankings. So let's get it in. I don't think there's much news either.
Congrats on your franchise quarterback. That's about it.
Jalen Hurts got the bag, like the Super Brinks truck bag. Took a team-friendly deal. I'm happy about it. It's good that the Eagles got in first before Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, and all those guys get their bags too, which drives the price up. So I'm happy about that. I don't know if you guys have any tidbits or dynasty.
Lamar is kind of wearing an egg on his face right now. You know, apparently that was the contract that Baltimore offered him. So I don't know how much more he's expecting at this point. You know, because he's been relying on that MVP status from 2019. Well, Hurts went to the Super Bowl, and he got, the contract that Lamar said no to. So be a very interesting week down in Baltimore.
It just keeps getting worse.
I did see right before we got on when I was looking for something else that Baltimore offered Lamar a contract that includes $200 million guaranteed. So we'll see.
Lamar, sign that bad boy.
He needs to. We need to figure out where he's going. But yeah, good extension there, Jibbs. So I like it.
All right. Wow. We'll see how we're doing 5 years down the road. But let's talk rookie tight ends or upcoming rookie tight ends. At number 12, we have Payne Durham. Current rankings, Coach Steve has him outside the top 10. So Dan has him 10th, and Brian has him outside the top 10.
And Brian, I'm sorry I spelled your name wrong. I spelled Brain instead.
Yeah. Big brain.
I was going to say it's because he's the brains of the show.
That's for sure.
What a compliment.
I'll take it.
I am known for misspelling everything in the world, so
that he is.
Apologize in advance.
But since Dan, you have him in your top 10, we'll let you start off the bat. Why do you like Payne?
I don't know if "like" is the word that I use. We have to rank 10 tight ends. I'll be honest. Anybody in the bottom 2 or 3 of this list, I'm kind of okay passing on. Payne has shown, receiving upside and, production in college, which is more than some of the other guys at the bottom of this list. So you know, me having him in 10th is not like I love this guy, can't wait to draft him. It's more like if my rookie draft goes 7 rounds, then I have a name to select.
Oh wow, a free agent like pickup afterwards too.
Yeah, exactly.
Brian, I'll let you go second since you're the other guest on the podcast today.
Yeah, so I have him just outside the top 10 at 11. I mean, if this class wasn't as deep as it was, he could be higher. But I agree with Dan that, you're looking at, a 5th round rookie pick or later right now based on the player eval and the expected draft capital. Some people like his hand. Some people say there's a little too much body catching. He's serviceable in a lot of areas, but I don't see anything really that stands out where I'm saying, oh, this is a guy I want to get my hands on. Just very meh, that's the best word I think to describe him is meh.
Okay. Or just a guy, Jag.
That's actually probably a great way to explain him, honestly. Like he's like another guy we'll talk about later, but without the athleticism, the separation, the speed. He's just a big body target guy that can work over the middle of the field and is a safety blanket. But I mean, he's good in the red zone. He'll probably be good in the red zone if he's worked upright, but he doesn't really have that athletic trait that can separate him as a difference maker as a tight end. He'll be a guy, we'll notice at some point during the fantasy season when he catches 3 touchdowns out of nowhere for no reason. That's going to be the kind of career he kind of has as the blocking tight end, number 2 guy that has a big week every once in a great ass while. So,
all right. You heard it there, and our 12th tight end does not look like he's going to have that big of an NFL career. But on to number 11, we have Davis Allen. Coach Steve has him 9th. Dan and Brian have him outside their top 10. Yeah, you guys can read the stats for yourself.
Not really.
Not really. I'll give you the good ones, though. Coach Steve, start us off.
Yeah, I mean, again, just like Dan mentioned, these guys are here at the end. It's like kind of pick and choose where you like your battle. I mean, I think he has the NFL size and length to be a functional tight end at the next level there. He's really good at catching the ball. He's got a big catch radius. Hands are good. He can handle contested catch situations. He's not a big speedster kind of guy. I think he's a little bit more refined than the guy we just talked about before. And he can also handle the blocks to some extent. What I saw on film was a little bit more exciting than what I saw on the film from the guy prior. That's kind of probably the reason why I don't have him in the top 10. But I think Allen can find himself a serviceable tight end 2 for a team and be productive to some extent. Not overly great, but decent enough.
Oh, Brian?
Yeah, I agree. Kind of once you're past, 9, 10, 11, it's kind of like, pick your poison. Does it really matter? Like, I technically have him at 16, but, is there real, like, could you give me an argument for moving him up a few spots? Yeah, sure. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because he's 6'5", which we like, but he's on the lighter side, which a lot of these tight ends are. That's not necessarily a bad thing because I think this class reflects where tight end is going in the NFL, and we may get into that a little bit later. But it's like either be 6'7" and a gazillion pounds like Darnell Washington, or don't, and he's kind of like he's kind of in between. He's kind of one or the other. I see. Matt Waldman talks about the clapping technique, when people have bad hands catching, and you see that with him on film. I think he's a competent blocker. He's a competent receiver. Again, just very meh, he could maybe be an H-back, in the NFL, something like that. I'm not seeing anything where I'm saying I'm looking forward to, but then, if he gets for whatever reason, I don't know, 4th round draft capital compared to some other guy I have higher who goes the 6th, and I'll think about it, right?
Always think about things.
Yeah, 4'8" at 245 pounds. It's kind of all I gotta say about Davis Allen, unfortunately. If you're gonna run that slow, then you gotta have the size to be a blocker, and he's got neither.
Those measurables do not pan out for me, so he won't be seeing any of my dynasty teams.
I mean, to Dan's point, I'm sorry, real quick, like that speed at that size is a 31st percentile speed score. Like, so Yeah, it's
Not it.
yeah, not-
Not happening.
Oh, poor guy. I hope he gets stronger then. Coming in at number 10, we have Josh Wiley. Coach Steve has him 10th. Dan has him 9th. Brian has him 10th as well. A little faster, 4.7, 40. So we're getting there, boys. We're getting there. Dan, we'll let you start them off. Give me a trait that you like Wiley over the other two tight ends that we mentioned before.
So a lot of times when we're like, going over prospect profiles, we look at the past season, but if you actually go back and look at the year that he played with Ritter in the COVID shortened 2020 season, he had a really nice year playing on that Cincinnati offense. So I don't want to fall back, on past tape as a reason that I like a prospect, but it does show that the ceiling is there, that he can be, a plus level asset in the passing game. So, we're still talking about our bottom 10 of rankings. So I'm not saying that he can reach that level again, but we've seen it happen before.
All right. Brian?
Yeah, pretty much. Same as Dan. I've seen him flash more of what we want to see than I have with the other guys. He has pretty good size. He's has pretty good hands, especially his short and intermediate. We've seen him line up in multiple places around the field. I do want to take this moment though to say that the other Cincinnati tight end, Leonard Taylor, might be another guy to look at as far as like a super deep sleeper goes. So, yeah,
I'll take that.
Coach Steve, wrap us up.
This tight end here, Wiley, he's decent. He's like these tight ends in this area are kind of just in a must situation here. There's nothing like super great about them. They all have some decent, better traits than others. What I liked about his receiving ability, I do like him as a receiver. He's got good hands, good body control. He's got good ball skills. He can block enough. That's something he definitely needs to work on, and that's for sure. But he has the size to fit for the NFL here. Kind of slightly reminds me of a poor man's Tyler Higbee, and Tyler Higbee had some decent success so far in his NFL career so far. So, I mean, there's a chance for him, if he lands in the right situation, to be able to, maybe develop into a little bit more of a better low-end tight end 2 kind of person. But he's just average, but I do like his receiving upside that he kind of offers for a team.
Okay. Keep that in the memory bank. Coming at number 9, we have Will Mallory. Coach Steve has him outside his top 10, unfortunately. Our coveted guests have them inside his top 10. Dan has him 8th. Brian has him 9th. So Coach Steve has some explaining to do. Dan, wait, give me some tidbits on Mallory. What's he good at? What's he bad at?
Yeah, so Mallory I saw at the Senior Bowl, and that kind of was the first time I've got, turned on to him. I saw some really nice catches in a couple of the drills. So at that point, I went back to my Airbnb, started diving into the tape, started looking at his numbers, and Miami has a pretty good history at the tight end position. If you look at some of the prospects that have come out of there, Jeremy Shockey, Kellen Winslow, David Njoku, it's in running for tight end with Iowa and some other schools. So I saw enough highlights at the Senior Bowl that I went back and I watched the tape, and he is a asset in the passing game, which we like to see. And he's also fast. I mean, look at that 40 time. It's the fastest one we've seen so far. So he is on the smaller side. He's only 239 pounds and 6 foot, which, this whole 2023 draft class, that seems to be the theme for all these prospects is tiny. But Will Mallory, he has the potential to be a difference maker for your fantasy team, which is, as we're going down the list, it's probably the first player that I've said that so far for.
Oh, wow. Okay, Brian.
I just want to echo what Dan said about the athleticism. At the combine, he looked good also in the gauntlet. When we think about these tight ends skewing smaller than maybe some past tight ends, I think part of that is just the evolution of the position. And in the NFL, they're using more of tandems, where they'll have more of a receiving threat, and then more a guy who's more of the blocking guy. And we're seeing that, I think, show up in this class. And Mallory is evidence of that, with being only 6'4" and 239. Also, like a lot of tight ends, just coincidentally in this class, he skews a little older. He'll be 24 in June. So that's something to keep an eye on, especially at a position that takes a little while to develop. But I think, if we're thinking about fantasy, we want these guys to run routes, and catch passes. And Mallory's got a chance to be that type of, big slot tight end that the NFL is using now to run those routes and catch those passes. And so, certainly athleticism can translate, and we hope he gets, good draft capital and landing spot.
Coach Steve, so you're telling me like guys with 4.8s and 4.9s over the 4.5?
Yeah, obviously the speed is fantastic. Obviously, a 4.5 is really, really good. It's just that, his ability to run fast and what I was able to watch on film about him just doesn't mix. He wasn't a good route runner from what I saw on film. I didn't like what I saw in his route running. I think that needs to be cleaned up a lot still. As a guy who's fast and doesn't seem to be able to get separation, that was something as a receiving skill set that I did not like in his game while watching film on him overall. To me, I feel like he's really raw and he needs to develop more to really take that next step. I didn't find too many fantastic traits outside of his speed that really works. Like, he probably need to be someone that needs to develop over time. I'm trying to think of a guy who was kind of underdeveloped and had that speed to him. I can't think of off the top of my head, but he just was somebody that I just thought was raw and needs more time to really develop. And I feel like he isn't going to be a guy that plays early on in his career. It's going to be more of like a 2-3 year window where he really gets an opportunity to shine, where I think some of the other guys I mentioned before have more of a skill set to start right away more often than compared to what Mallory can.
Okay, I do see some of your restraints on him. Oh, actually a tight end I heard of. Coming at number 8, we got Luke Schoonemaker, Michigan product. Coach Steve has him number 7. Dan has him outside the top 10. Brian has him 6, actually. So, Brian, you start us off. You're the highest. I don't want to say you like him or love him.
Yeah. So, when I'm looking at my positional tiers here for the tight ends, I've got 5 guys that are essentially in 2 tiers, and then it's kind of, all right, who do you like after that? And I've got is it Schoonmaker? Like, I've heard it pronounced in 9 different ways. I don't watch many broadcasts of college,
I've heard Schoonmaker.
Oh, okay. So, all right. And, but I've got him, I've got him at 6. I think he's got the potential to grow into what we want to see from these fantasy tight ends. And so I elevated him more from the standpoint of like an upside ranking, like I'm probably ranking him based on like, okay, in my top 5, now it's pick your poison. So like, what do I like about a guy? The athleticism isn't bad. 9.75 RAS, 4.63 40 time, isn't great, but for a guy who's 245, 250 and 6'5", it's not terrible. I think he's in the running for like top 3 blockers in this class. I don't care much about blocking with a tight end, but I know the NFL does. So that could get him playing time. And I think he's got like Michigan offense it's the Michigan offense. And I think a lot of guys go overlooked. And I think he's got a chance to grow into like a low end, like a poor man's Freiermuth. And so I'm kind of more ranking him on upside. Yeah.
Coach Steve.
Yeah, Schoonemaker, or however you say. I'm going to say Schoonemaker. I think I like him. I did like watching the film on him. I saw a lot of good things overall. I think that what Brian said about him and his ability to block is really good, and NFL teams will like that, which will get him on the field. And he was good in a lot of play actions scenarios while watching film on him. Again, I know while Dan's probably not going to like him, there's definitely going to be some things he'll mention in a second, but I feel like he was just an overall a good, effective tight end where he doesn't probably have upside play to his game, but I feel like he's just a solid floor play kind of tight end where you're going to get that blocking ability and you're going to be able to get, catching opportunities out of him constantly in the NFL as being a potential, that 1B kind of tight end for an NFL team.
Man, why are you hating?
Age is why I'm hating. He'll be 25 years old during his rookie season, and I don't want to say that I try to predict NFL draft capital when I'm making my rankings, but I do think that I don't want to make rankings where I'm going to make big swings and big adjustments based off of draft capital. And I'm just not sure if the age is going to scare off NFL teams. He's going to be 25 his rookie year. He'll be 29 by the time he finishes his rookie contract. I will give it, yes, he is a very plus level athlete. His RAS score is off the charts. 4.63 at his size is great. The age scares me a lot, and I didn't see anything popping off to kind of get me to overlook that age, if you know what I mean.
I hear you. That's one of my biggest things in Dynasty is age, and it's definitely a predicament when you're getting into some of these, especially tight ends, given the scenario that they're not always getting playing time, and you're going to have a 3-year asset who's going to be 30 years old on your Dynasty taxi squad or roster. So, Zach Kuntz. Go ahead.
Yeah, the thing is, it's kind of like it's a double-edged sword with tight end, right? Or maybe that's not the right metaphor. These guys take a little while to develop, so we're a little more cautious with a 24 or 25-year-old prospect. At the same time, age matters less for tight end and quarterback than it does for the other two positions. And so, we see guys be late bloomers. We see guys, be productive into their 30s. And so, I don't know because, we all love a certain tight end that we're going to talk about later who is going to be 24 in October. And it's 1 year, so I don't know.
You never know. Like you said, Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews kind of bloomed off. I wouldn't say late, but those are the two prime examples of tight ends that we're drafting now and redrafting Dynasty high up that took time to develop. Zach Kuntz, Coach Steve has an 8th, Dan has an 5th, and Brian has an 8th. Dan, you're hot and cold. You like one, you don't like the other. So give me the scoop on Zach.
Yeah, when Steve sent me over the rankings for everyone, I was like, oh, we're gonna have a couple conversations about some of these guys. So Kuntz is the RAS god. He is Mr. Athleticism. He's already got the gold star from the combine for that award. He actually, I believe it's the highest RAS score ever. I've been using a lot of relative athletic scores in my process this year. It's great instead of having to track down, who's got this pro day number, who's got that number. It's a great website, one spot for all your information. And when we're looking at prospects that are probably going to be mid to late round picks, you need to weigh athleticism, I think, more heavily. This is a reason like Donovan Peoples-Jones, I think, is a good example of this. He was a 6th round NFL draft pick, yet I was still drafting him in my rookie draft because I knew he had a great athletic profile. And then Kuntz is kind of the same thing. He might go in the 5th, 6th round of the NFL, but I know that the athleticism will keep him on an NFL roster and will get him active on game days. So obviously my ranking is way higher than everybody else's, but I think I don't think this tight end class is super awesome like everyone else is making out to seem. And so I will default to athleticism when it comes to players in similar ranking spots for me. But I'd love to hear about Steve and Brian and what their thoughts are on Kuntz.
We're gonna let Brian go first, but these tight ends, I feel like the last couple of years, this has been you get your first guy, like I said, Kyle Pitts, and everyone else is just trash. So like to have a little bit of depth goes a long way. Brian, so let's hear some concerns you have with Kuntz.
You know, I think eighth was a good, like, I'm surprised I'm kind of like defending the low on this. I think, I mean, I like the player. You know, he's in that tier with Mallory, two athletic guys with good receiving upside. I think with Kuntz, one thing that is going for him that people don't realize is he was originally at Penn State before Old Dominion, and that's actually a good sign, I think, because Penn State does a pretty good job with tight ends. So you would think that they would do a good job at recruiting tight ends. He was just behind some guys there. One of them, I don't know, you might have heard of him, Pat Fryermuth. But I think when I look at the unrefinement, the lack of production, the sort of bad hand technique, catching the ball, that sort of thing. If we are talking about a guy who's going to take a little while for the game to translate to the NFL, and if we're talking about a guy who's, I'm not one of those people who says, you know, always production over projection, right? But this is pretty much a total projection guy for the most part, and you know, so maybe I'll fade that a little bit, you know. But I mean, I like the player. You know, I've seen him go fourth round in rookie mocks. Like, you know, why not take a swing on a Kuntz in the fourth round rather than, you know, some day 3 wide receiver who's like the 7th wide receiver on your dynasty roster, right? So yeah,
I hear that. Coach Steve, wrap this up.
Yeah, I mean, I did like Kuntz a lot. I think he's just a solid wide receiver overall. I mean, you know, the athletic ability is fantastic to see. And when watching film on him, I saw way too many times where he kind of just catches the ball and goes down and doesn't really have that ability to kind of create yards after the catch too often. And I don't think he's going to be much of a deep threat. I think he's going to be kind of that nice safety blanket over the middle of the field when a quarterback kind of needs a person right there in the middle and get that first down when he's right past it, the line of there. Again, just decently overall. I mean, the limited experience over his college career, not a concern, but definitely something to take note of. I mean, he had just one good season in 2021 where he got actually the full-time role. Not saying that's a bad thing, but, you know, there's limited experience as a college athlete playing the tight end position, now translating to the NFL. Again, I think he might need some time, but I think he's a good athlete and could benefit from some development and some waiting behind somebody, and then maybe eventually taking over the tight end 1 position for a team.
Okay. And going on to number 6, we have Tucker Kraft. Coach Steve has him 6, Dan has him 7th, and so does Brian. Coach Steve, since you're the low man, I mean, the highest person on Tucker, you go first. Tell me why you like him.
He's a tight end that's in the middle of the state of America, and they just breed tight ends out there, or just breed football players out there. That's what we like to start off with that. But like, no, he's got the size and strength for an NFL tight end. He's very athletic. He's got that receiving upside in his game. It's a little bit raw, but I know he's someone I think they can use him kind of all over the middle, all over the field, kind of in line or out in the slot. He's got the speed. He's got short area quickness, what I really like in his game. Again, level of competition. That's the only like downfall. Hands and the drops, slightly concerning on that. But I mean, I think things like that can be cleaned up, I think. And he should be fine at the next level. He has a lot of good traits that form him to be able to be a good tight end at the next level. But the guys ahead of him are just so much better in terms of a lot of different things. That kind of why I'm here at 6. But again, I like him. I'm high on. Obviously, I'm the highest on him, but I do like him a lot.
I wouldn't say high. This is pretty much the
This is like the beginning of really good tight ends right here.
I was going to say, you're putting Steve in a spot saying he's the high guy, but I agree with everything he says, and I got him, you know, backed up in 7th. And, you know, we talked about age a little bit with some of the lower level prospects, and Kraft does come in at 22 years old right now. A thing I do with these tight ends is I let the NFL scouting community kind of influence my rankings at this point. And the NFL scouting community is very high on Kraft and what he can do. The main concern is obviously going to be the level of competition, you know, playing in the FCS. But we've seen people come out of the FCS before and be successful. So there is a track record of it happening. And, like I said, if the scouting community is high on him and he's going to get, early day 3 draft capital, then, I'm all in. I'm down for some Tucker Craft.
Wrap us up, Brian.
Yeah, I agree with what's been said. He's not going to be 23 till November. He's got stuff. I mean, he is a little raw and did have a bad level of competition. But he did flash enough, and there is enough there to work with. I think he improved his hands from 2021 to 2022. I think he's aggressive run blocking, which I think the NFL coaches are gonna like. He's in a tier for me with he's in a tier of 6-7, with Schoonmaker. Really, after like my top 5, I'm looking at like 6 through probably 11 that like I would not be surprised if they're like completely all jumbled up after the NFL draft, right? Even though I have them in 3 little separate mini tiers of 2 guys, they're probably going to get jumbled up.
Jibs, who he same college he went to? Dallas Goddard.
Oh, I was trying to guess the school. I was like, I don't even know what the hell that
South
is.
Dakota State.
Yeah, it's a Jackrabbit.
The Jackrabbits. Yep.
Okay, well, we have one cop right there, FCS.
You could be him. That would be great.
Oh, for sure. I'll take that in a heartbeat as a low-end pick. All right, top 5, guys. Tight end U, Iowa, Sam Laporta. Coach Steve has him 5th. Our guests, Dan and Brian, have him both 4th collectively. All righty. Brian, I'll let you get the first shot on this one. I don't.
Yeah. So one thing to think about when you're watching Laporta or looking at stats with Laporta is that as much as Iowa is tight end U, it wasn't exactly offense U. I forget the number that I heard like last week about the number of passing touchdowns the entire offense had all season.
8.
Like, yeah, there you go. Like it was putrid. Yeah. So, think about that when you're thinking about Laporta. This is the guy you want, right? And he's in a great pocket for us. He is the new tight end for the NFL at 6'3", 245, and athletic and fast, 4.5, 940, right? He is, I think, well-rounded and safe and good floor and pro-ready, good enough blocker and good enough hands to probably get out there right away. You've seen him make some difficult catches with some questionable quarterback play sometimes. I think he might be one of those guys, and I'm going to talk about another guy later on like this too, where his blocking is like good enough to like get in the pros now, where it may actually slow down his fantasy football receiving production, which is kind of like it's a good trait of his that's going to end up being bad for us. But this is, I think, where when I said like, I have my top 5 and then it's everybody else, this is where we're getting into the guys that I'm really excited about. And the other reason he's in a good pocket for us, and I'll shut up after this, is that he's really not going until late 3rd or 4th round in mocks at the moment, right? And I don't expect that to get too much helium based on his expected draft capital, because there's a good 3 or 4 guys ahead of him. And why that's a good pocket is rookie tight ends from the rookie draft to like the first year or so, most of them actually lose value, right? And so the guys that lose the least or do gain value tend to be the later guys, right? And so because the acquisition cost is so low, right? So grab yourself a Laporta or a Musgrave that we're going to talk about, in like the 3rd or 4th round instead, or maybe like, some 0 RB guys again, instead of that, like the 6th or 7th wide receiver on your team, because you kind of liked him as a sleeper, like I love Jonathan Mingo, right? But if I don't like where he ends up, and Laporta's on the board, tight end premium, I'm probably taking Laporta.
Yeah, and just to reinforce that point of how bad that Iowa offense was last year, there was the game Iowa versus Minnesota. I don't know if you guys remember this at all, but during college football season, I do a lot of sports betting, and the total line was set at 14.5. Not for just Iowa, like for both teams. So 2 touchdowns. The game finished as a shootout. It was 13-10. But so the Iowa offense was not clicking on all cylinders. But I'll tell you what was clicking on all cylinders was Laporta and his broken tackles and his yards after catch. He was just like, I don't want to say electric with the ball in his hands because he's not looking like Tank Dell out there. He's not looking like Bijan Robinson out there. But for an athletic tight end, he was making all the moves that he needed to make people miss, to break tackles, and, to be an asset in the receiving game. And we've seen TJ Hawkinson, George Kittle, Noah Fant, the other tight ends coming out of this program have all been, kind of yards after catch type of guys. And this is like a perfect fantasy football type of tight end. And like Brian was saying, he's not, now who knows, after this show, as we get closer to the draft, things might change, but he's not like part of people's big 3 for the most part. He's going kind of after all those players, and it's a good value, because I talk about on a lot of mock drafts shows I don't want to grab the first or second tight end. I'll let the value of a Laporta or one of the players we're going to speak about shortly, a couple picks later, just come to me. And because tight ends rookie year, it's such a crapshoot that I'd rather just take the lesser investment for the same chance of getting plus level asset.
Dan, the question is, did you take the over and win?
No, I'm sick. I took the under.
Oh man.
Yeah, imagine sweating a 13-10 football game in November.
It's crazy because they're like 60, 80 point over unders. Coach Steve, low man, finishes off.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a low man. I mean, I am in terms of the 3 of us in our rankings, but I really do like Laporta. I have him as a really potential big sleeper at the next level. You guys kind of said a lot of great things about him. He's got the athleticism, forced missed tackles was fantastic, can catch the ball and run very well after the catch. A lot of great traits. Again, if I want to say some negative, I guess he had 14 drops over his 3 seasons there at Iowa. I mean, the offense was terrible, though. I mean, he led the team in receiving 3 out of the 4 years he was there. That's how bad this Iowa offense was. And, functional strength, you could use a little bit more of that, in contested catch situations. Definitely saw some struggles there at times. The NFL is going to be a little bit bigger and faster to handle. So hopefully that it can be just worked up a little bit with coaching, but he's a tight end I am definitely targeting later in drafts if he falls to the right team, or what, even if he doesn't. I mean, I think he has the talent to kind of oversee any kind of struggles in terms of, unless he goes really late in the NFL draft, he's going to be a really good tight end that everyone should probably target in their rookie drafts.
What are you guys talking about him? I don't think he's going to go. Luke Musgrave. This is a difference. Coach Steve has him 4th. Dan has him 3rd. Brian has him 5th. Dan, we're going to let you start it off on this Oregon State alumni.
Yeah, so Luke Musgrave, for people, most people don't know, he kind of missed the entire year with a injury. This was another player I was lucky enough to meet at the Senior Bowl. I actually got to sit down and speak with him about his injury and his rehab status. And one story that I like to share is, so day 1 of practice, he was out there looking kind of stiff, kind of not what I was expecting, kind of terrible, to be honest with you. So prior to day 2 practice, we have the media breakfast where we're allowed to pull players aside for interviews, sit down, for 5 minutes and speak with him. And so I asked Luke, I was like, so you're not fully back from your injury? Like, you're not done with your rehabilitation process? Like, how far into that process are you? And he says, no, I'm fully rehabbed. I'm fully ready to go. He's like, the only thing you can't rehab is football shape. He said, I'm not in football shape yet. There's only one way to get into football shape, and that's by playing football. And let me tell you, day 2 practice, he went out and was lighting it on fire. And I turned to my one buddy who was there. I was like, I think Luke is back in football shape after that one day of practice. And he looked like a wide receiver out there with his hands. I love he goes out and uses his hands to make catches. He's not a body catcher. And I just think he's like your perfect fantasy football tight end. And it's a guy that since the Senior Bowl, I've been gone back and watched his tape from 2021, and just everything I see, I really like. He's not a super refined route runner, but I don't expect my tight ends to be super refined route runners. So I know my ranking is probably higher than most people in this class. But I would say he's like a cheaper version of Dalton Kincaid, who obviously we'll talk about later. But Kincaid is a player who's going to be going in your second round of your rookie drafts, whereas Musgrave is a player that you could probably get in the third round. So I love Musgrave as a prospect, and I have a feeling I'm going to be having a lot of Musgrave across all my dynasty leagues this year.
Brian? No, Steve. Sorry. I'm reading
Taking
things
me out of order, man. Come on.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So I'll tell you this, Jibs. He reminds me of Mike Gesicki. Maybe it was a slight
sold.
Mike Gesicki here. Musgrave, I mean, Dan kind of said a lot of fantastic things about him. It's hard to go back that. I mean, he's got, everything possible that you would like in a tight end in terms of their receiving upside. He's got the speed, he's got the athleticism. He can play in the traditional slot if he needs to, or outside. He's got good hands, ability to track the ball very well, can beat out linebackers. Again, the blocking could be a concern. Again, we know these NFL teams are using multiple tight ends in different ways now in terms of both having one as a blocker, one as a receiving back. That is something that concerns me. 2 touchdowns over his 13 starts. Again, it's not a major thing, but, he obviously isn't seeing the red zone work as much as frequently as we would want to. But in the 2 games he did play in 2022, he had 2 games, 169 yards in 2 games. That's explosiveness in terms of production for a tight end right there that you're getting. So he deserves this top 5 selection right now. Again, he'd probably be higher if I trusted him as a blocker more, or can block to be the better word to use. But I really do like Musgrave a lot there. He's a really good receiving tight end.
Brian?
I don't have too much more to say. I don't know if Oregon State had their pro day and if he participated. I didn't really track that, so I don't know if we have any 3-cone or 20 shuttle numbers for him.
I actually have them in front of me.
Okay, yeah. So go ahead.
His 3-cone was 7.09 seconds. His short shuttle was 4.41 seconds, which isn't great by any stretch of the imagination, but it's also pretty decent for his size.
Yeah. I mean, without that, he was 995 on the RAS. Do you what's his updated?
977.
Yeah. Okay. So still, really athletic, right?
Yeah. Still really good.
Mean, I've seen people say tight end prospects like Musgrave come along once every 10 years. I've seen people say Musgrave is, underrated as a blocker and that sort of thing. Listen, I think a lot of what's been said is accurate about him. He's the type of tight end the NFL is using now in the passing game. He's the type of tight end that we want to get fantasy points on our rosters, and he is a poor man's or discount Kincaid. On Dynasty Fever, we had Brandon Lejeune on the other night, and what we did was kind of play towards the end a few rounds of like, who do you want at cost? Right. And Kincaid, I gave him Kincaid and Musgrave, and he chose Musgrave. Right. So, I mean, that's saying something. If you don't spend the early second in a super flex on Kincaid because you're grabbing a running back or something like that, or because you have faith in Hyatt or something, you can grab Musgrave later.
Or the even better move is to trade back and then you get Musgrave and Laporta.
There you go.
Because like we said, the hit rate on rookie tight ends is so low, you might as well, double your shots, so to speak. I
hear you. That's cost effectiveness right there.
2 for 1 special, they call it.
Going to number 3, aforementioned Darnell Washington. Coach Steve has him 3rd, Dan has him 6th, and Brian has him number 2. Brian, start us off on looks like big Darnell Washington.
Yeah, so I knew I'd probably be the high man on D Dubs. This is a total my guy. I will admit, it's a total projection. Although not total. I think he's got underrated ball skills and hands. I think he's going to be good enough as a route runner in what they want him to do that he's going to be a good, reliable red zone target. Here's the thing about Washington, right? Like the reason I have him 2 is because we're starting to get in the territory of if I'm going to spend between a late first and I don't know, a mid-second, late second on a tight end, right? I want somebody who can be impactful, right? The success of my dynasty team is often hangs on the value and production of the most impactful players, right? And that's something I got, from the way it was phrased that way from a Jacob Sanderson essay that he did on his Substack when I was reviewing why Anthony Richardson is the unquestionable quarterback 1 for Dynasty Fantasy Football. And that's kind of what I think with Washington. He is so good at blocking that it may slow down his fantasy development, right? Like that's what everybody says. Oh, teams are just going to ask him to be a blocker. Okay, fine. Is he pro ready as a blocker, although with some flaws? Yes, he is. Are teams going to throw him in that right away, and therefore it probably slows down his development as a weapon? Yeah, sure. But I think once they figure out what they have and how to use him, right, we're going to see what people like me see. Like this is total optimism ceiling ranking. You got to remember something about Washington too, right? He was playing next to Bowers, right? And on a team that ran a lot, right? So you're not going to have a whole lot of hefty production stats in that situation. He's a 5-star recruit, right? He's got just super athleticism, especially for his size, 9.85 RAS score. You have to take into context playing with Bowers and the running game. Like I know that I sound like I'm drinking the Kool-Aid and like he's kind of like my Jelani Woods of this year, but like because I loved Jelani last year. But like imagine if Jelani came out as a better blocker with better hands, right? And you have Darnell Washington. And I think his ceiling is probably the second highest in this class if he puts it all together. And so if you're asking me to spend that kind of a pick to get a tight end, give me somebody who's going to be impactful like Darnell Washington.
Love the analysis. Coach Steve, middleman.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Washington I like him because of his upside, what he could do at the next level. The blocking is obviously fantastic. He's the best blocker in this draft class. I mean, he's going to be used as a blocker early on in his NFL career, wherever he ends up. Again, it's the receiving game. Can he develop into a fantastic receiver? Now, he might not be someone who, again, he has the upside to do it, but I don't know if he's actually going to do what his upside has potential to do. But I think he can be used in different ways on the offense outside of blocking. You get down into the red zone, he's going to be a red zone threat. He's going to catch touchdowns. I think you can use him in the backfield in random situations where he can actually do something really big. Again, he doesn't have the speed that you want right now in terms of a true athletic tight end like some of these other guys in the top 4. But I think he has the upside to do something where he's going to catch the ball, and he might not outbeat you with his speed, but if you're going to try to take this man down, he is going to stiff arm you like crazy. Like just like in this photo here, he is going to break many tackles at the NFL level due to his size here. And again, he didn't get a ton of playing time at Georgia. Georgia just didn't really use him to that nature. But if he lands with a team where they kind of bring out his best abilities, he is going to make an impact at the NFL level in a big way.
Before we get into you, Dan, we got Kyle right here. He's in the rookie draft right now. 14-team Superflex starter 11 PPR tight end premium 1.75 PPR. I traded the pick that I would have spent on Darnell Washington for He gave up the 207, 302, got Rashad Bateman, and the 401. Guys, how we feeling about this?
I'm not a big Rashad Bateman fan right now, so I feel like I shouldn't be the one to speak on it.
Abstained.
I too am not a big Rashad Bateman fan.
I'm not a huge Bateman fan, but he's cheap. He's pretty cheap right now, right? And what you're saying is you're getting a wide receiver 1 or 1A on a team that's probably going to pass more. And he's a bit of a known quantity, and you gave up the 207 and 302. Like it's not bad. It's not bad. Yeah.
The one thing I will say is, since you're conducting a rookie draft prior to the NFL draft, you are getting a known asset, because for all we know, next Thursday, next Friday, next Saturday, we could get nothing but bad landing spots, nothing but poor draft capital for offensive pieces, and then all of a sudden Rashad Bateman looks like wide receiver 4 if he's stuck in this class. So I will say that the knownness, I guess, I can't think of good words right now. The ability that what asset you have in your team versus, you're sitting around next week and hoping who you selected at 207 landed a good spot. There is an upside to that, that fact.
Plus, since Kyle's a sicko and has Evan Hull as his RB4, he can get him at 401 and be happy.
Exactly.
And Dan, do you have anything you want to say about Darnell?
Oh, I have a lot to say about Darnell.
Go on. I didn't want to let you off the hook.
So I am obviously the lowest on Darnell Washington, and I feel like I've been that way for a little while now. I feel like my take is maybe not in line with what the rest of the community thinks. And I will say this with a little asterisk on it. I am letting the NFL draft tell me what NFL teams think of Darnell Washington, because based on my tape study, I think NFL teams are going to view him as a third offensive tackle, which can be a cheat code if he lands on the right offense with the right offensive coordinator. I think he's going to be an amazing NFL player. I think he's going to sell a ton of jerseys for his franchise. I think there's going to be a ton of highlights, but I don't think he's going to give you anything from a fantasy football perspective. I think his route running is borderline non-existent. Most of the receptions I saw, and there's only 45 of them this year, so I saw most of them, were plays where he was asked to block, and then once the quarterback left the pocket, he would slip into the flat, or he would break off into a seam, kind of like a delayed route type of concept. I don't know how to judge his verticality in like a 50-50 ball situation, because in most situations, all he had to do was just raise his left hand, and he was already higher than most defensive backs in the SEC can jump. So I'm not saying that's a knock. I'm just saying, like, I can't grade that aspect of his game just because I didn't see it. And you look at his vertical, and he had a 31-inch vertical, which sounds like a terrible number, and it is testing wise, but you add 31 inches to his 6'7" frame, and you're talking? He's getting up there 10 feet in the air. So I think Darnell Washington is the type of player who's going to make a great impact on his NFL team, and I think he's going to be a day 2 pick in the NFL draft. I just don't think he's going to be a huge asset when it comes to fantasy football. But this is also a take that I'm completely fine being wrong on. If he breaks out and is the next, Dallas Goedert plus, I won't be mad at all. I'll be so happy for him because I think he's a phenomenal football player and an amazing athlete. I'm just not ready to add him to my dynasty rosters because I don't think I'm going to get the fantasy production that most people are projecting given his rookie rookie draft capital, if that makes sense to you guys.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
sure.
and I think a lot of what we're doing, especially before we have the data from the NFL draft, is asking ourselves which guys are we willing to make bets on, given what we know, right? and there's a reason I made a 45-minute video on why I'm willing to make a bet on Anthony Richardson as QB1 for fantasy football, whereas some people think I'm absolutely nuts, right? And so, Washington's a guy I'm making a bet on with tight ends. Dan seems out at cost. Out at cost describes me on Hyatt and A-Chain, right? Like we all, it's what bets are we willing to make, and as long as we think our process is sound, like Dan said, you know what? If the guy ends up successful, good for him. I'm okay being wrong because I think I made the right bet.
Yeah. And like you mentioned before, playing in a tight end room with Brock Bowers, and then who's that? Eric Gilbert, who had the transfer out of Georgia. It's an amazing tight end room. So it's not a surprise that he got so little production. Bowers really commanded most of that offense. Even if you talk about the wide receivers and the running backs, Bowers was the offense.
Coming in number 2, we have Michael Meyer, Notre Dame product. Coach Steve has him 2, Dan has him 2, Brian has him 3rd. Brian, since you're actually the lowest person, which is quite high, we'll let you start us off.
Yeah, I kind of feel like, Mayer came in like a few months ago. It was like it's Mayer and everybody else, and then we kind of have said, well, look at this and that, and but now I'm hearing a little bit of like the people now pushing back of like y'all got drunk on Dalton Kincaid and stuff, like Mayer's won. I think when I look at Michael Mayer, he's safe, he's well rounded, he's probably got the best floor of the tight ends, right? But if you're asking me to spend the 111, the 203 on a tight end and a premium, if I'm gonna make that gamble with high draft capital on a rookie tight end, I want somebody who's got the chance to be a difference maker, a separator at the position. Like for me personally, Darnell, and then the other guy that we're going to talk about in a minute. I don't dislike Michael Mayer, right? I think he's going to have a good career. I think he could be even, I don't know, peak Zach Ertz at his ceiling. He could be in the tier of dynasty tight ends with, I don't know, Freiermuth and Dulcich and Ingram and have a good fantasy career. But I also know that there are limitations to his athleticism. I also know that, like George Kittle, he's going to be asked to block, and sometimes that's good to get because it gets you on the field, quote unquote. But sometimes it limits your routes, which I hopefully get a chance to talk about when I talk about Kincaid. He's got the proven production. He's got the hands. He's all that. It's just that of my big 3. He's vanilla, and so he's going to be 3, where the other 2 guys have the upside. And if you're asking me to spend a high pick, give me Rocky Road, give me peanut butter fudge, right?
I like that. Dan.
Yeah, I agree with that take. I describe Mayer as good at everything, not exceptional at anything. He's a good blocker. He's not Darnell Washington. He's a decent route runner. He's not Dalton Kincaid. He's got, decent hands. He's just like, just an overall decent prospect, which for an NFL team is great because that fills multiple roles. That fills your large blocking tight end. It fills your move tight end, and it fills your slot receiver type tight end. So NFL teams are going to value him so greatly because he does all those roles on one contract with one salary. It's not like you have to fill out a tight end room like you would a wide receiver room with multiple body types to do multiple different roles. And the athleticism is going to hold him back. But the positive is he is going to see the field early, and he's going to see the field often. So I agree. The ceiling is not there for fantasy football. I don't envision him having anything more than tight end 6 to tight end 9 type of seasons for your fantasy football team. But the thing is, he's always going to finish in that range. So he is going to be I don't want to say he's a perfect backup tight end because I just said tight end 6 to tight end 9. But let's be honest, anything below tight end 4 is not really making a difference for your dynasty fantasy football roster as far as winning championships go. So I know I have him second, and I kind of been bad talking him this entire time, but he is, I guess, what you would call safe. He is a safe prospect that is going to get the draft capital, and he's going to be on the field, and you're going to be able to plug him into your lineup year one. And, I wish he had more upside, but I think just the athleticism really, really holds him back.
Stevie.
Yeah. He kind of reminds me of probably going to have a career kind of like Kyle Rudolph. Well, Kyle Rudolph was a player that he had a couple peaks at times, but he was just a decent tight end overall, good blocking tight end, but can catch the ball really well. Again, better for an NFL team. I don't think we're going to be talking about him too often where he's the top 3 tight end in fantasy ever, but he's going to be in that 7 to 10 range where he's reliable most weeks, but there's going to be weeks where he's going to put up minimal yardage. I mean, I think he's a good overall tight end. Again, he just doesn't have that athletic upside that makes you really, really like, wow, like I really want this tight end on my team, or that an NFL team might find, but they're going to find the blocking to be really useful and just all around good tight end. Again, if he lands in a situation where they know what they have in him, I could be really excited about him. But if he lands in a situation where he just doesn't get used correctly with his talent and what he's able to do, he's just going to have one of those mediocre careers. But he could end up having a really solid overall career where you know his name, but that he was never like an elite tight end.
And our number 1 tight end, Dalton Kincaid. Everyone has him first. Dan, we'll let you start us off on our last prospect of the day.
Yeah. So Kincaid, what's not to say? I love Dalton Kincaid. Obviously Dynasty Nerds we're a big Kincaid company, and he is just the perfect fantasy football tight end. His route running is great. His hands are amazing. And I will just tell everyone that if you're not big into film and you just want to watch one game and kind of get a feel for Kincaid, the USC game last year, not the bowl game, the regular season game, he ate up like 16, 17 targets. He broke 200 yards. It's just a lot of fun to watch. And then, go watch the Pac-12 championship game as well. Kincaid is going to get the draft capital where we're going to see him on the field right away. And we're going to know right away what he's going to look like at the next level. He is more receiver than he is blocker, which I love for my fantasy football tight ends, but he can block as well. So I just think out of this tight end class, this is, as we can see with our rankings, all three of us agree, this one's just like a slam dunk, top of the class type of guy.
Brian?
Yeah, to veggie back on what Dan was saying, if you listen to Rich Dotson describe Dalton Kincaid, Rich Dotson of Dynasty Nerds, I believe the phrase "husband material" was used in the broadcast. So let me just play devil's advocate just a teeny bit for Kincaid. He is going to be 24 in October. There's a back injury there, and there's the whole. He didn't produce until what's his face? Queef was injured, right? So there are those concerns. So even taking that into account, the fact that I easily have him as my one, I think kind of says something. Here's the thing about tight ends. People are like, "Oh, blocking gets you on the field. You can't." But first of all, he's an underrated blocker, particularly in blocking that isn't in line, I'm not an X's and O's guy really, but in the trenches, straight ahead run blocking, or if you're asking him to go up against a really good edge rusher, yeah, sure. But if he's like pulling, or I think they call it, what do they call it? Like stalk blocking or something, right? Like if he's doing those types of blocks, he's actually not bad. Right. So it's not like he's a complete zero there. But even so, I kind of don't GAF about whether or not a tight end can block well. Like in a sense, it's good because the NFL will like him and give him an opportunity. What I care about is route participation. On what percentage of the quarterback's dropbacks is my tight end running a route? That's what I care about. So say, for example, if Michael Mayer's snap percentage is, I don't know, 85, right? Something, really high, right? And Kincaid's is, I don't know, 67, right? Something like that. But Kincaid's route percentage is like, 79, right? And Mayer's is much lower than that. What the hell do I care? I want fantasy points, right? It can maybe affect a red zone play here or there, but the way that the way that NFL offenses are moving, they're gonna have the blocker in line with Kincaid out there in the slot. Like, if there's one tight end that has the opportunity to be a real difference maker and separator at the position, I'm not saying as good as Pitts and Kelsey, but like, where you're saying he is now giving me positional advantage, it's Dalton Kincaid.
All right, Steve.
I mean, there's really not much left to say about this man. Dan and Brian said basically every amazing thing about him that I would have probably thought of saying, to be honest. But I mean, yeah, he is slightly inexperienced, just 1 year of high school football. So, he is still growing into his position as a tight end, and it is tough to really grasp the tight end position as a whole early on in your career. You need to develop, understand, learn. So he's doing that. Again, he could end up being a really good blocker eventually. Again, he might not have the actual strength to be a true blocking tight end, but I think, like Brian said, he will be able to develop probably into a pretty decent blocking tight end where he's good enough. He might not be great, but he's good enough, and he's got that receiving upside that we already seen in his game there. Again, really excited to see where he ends up at the next level here, because I think he can make a major impact for an NFL team and definitely for our fantasy teams.
Well, you guys heard it here. 10 prospects. We all delivered it under an hour. If you guys...
One more.
Oh, one more? What you got for us, Brian?
Elijah Higgins, right? Went to the Senior Bowl at 225. They said, go practice with the tight ends. Showed up at the combine at 235. If he comes into the draft and the NFL team drafts him as a tight end, he might be in that mix with Schoonmaker and Kuntz and Mallory and stuff for me. A name to watch if he's drafted as a tight end.
I like that little nugget. Okay. All right. Well, Dan, you want to let the fantasy community or our listeners know what you're doing this week, or what some of your articles or any appearance you're going to be making?
Yeah. This week is final prep week for the draft for me. Dynasty Nerds will be having a live watch-along draft experience on our YouTube channel, nights 1 and 2. Coach Steve will be gracing us with his presence one of those nights. So a lot of work to be done, a lot of graphics, a lot of prep, but it's all good fun when it comes to draft season.
Brian, what about you?
Yeah, so at Dynasty Fever Pod, our episode that drops Thursday is going to be finally our 2023 class superlatives. Going to have a little fun with our final episode pre-draft. Dynasty Saturday Night 5 at 7:30 on the Going for Two YouTube channel. Also, our final pre-draft episode. If you're not watching the Nerds on nights 1 and 2, and actually also on day 3, Going for Two is gonna have streams the whole time as well. I'm gonna hop on night 1 at 9 o'clock with my Dynasty Saturday Night 5 co-host, and gonna guest a little bit on the Saturday afternoon thing. Just have a whole lot of fun, and all this bickering that we did for 4 months. The NFL can tell you, well, this is what we really think. then I'll be making my thread of here's round 6, 7, and UDFA players that might have a shot, because I need to dream and I need to scrape through the shag carpet for cocaine.
Coach Steve, what does the fantasy coaches have on the horizon?
Yeah, guys. So, like I said, this was a fantastic show. Thank you guys both for jumping on. A lot of fun talking tight ends today. Obviously, there's some guys you need to keep your eyes on. We'll be back next week doing our quarterbacks right before the NFL draft. We'll have that, the top 10 fantasy rookie quarterbacks. So we'll talk about them next week. And then, we'll be back after the NFL draft talking about the breakdown of basically what happened actually, and get real analysis on, instead of just us predicting what might happen here. So thank you all for listening. And yeah, Jibs, I'll finish this off.
You can find us on YouTube at The Fantasy Coaches. You can find us on Twitter at Coaches Fantasy. You can find Coach Steve at Coach Steve.
Yeah, Coach Stephen P.
Coach Steve. I deactivated Twitter, so
no. Hot take.
Hot take is out. But as always, guys, thank you for watching us. Subscribe, follow, tell a friend. Definitely go draft crazy, and I hope you guys have a good week. We're out. Fantasy Coaches. Peace.